My name's Joanne Arinder. I'm at University of Oregon, but when I was doing my PhD, I was at Washington State, and we did a virtual reality program. And so 3 years of my life went into this program, but 1 full year was in VR. And so today, that 1 full year, and some of the things we learned from the 3 full years is what we'll be talking about today. Once this clicker decides. There we go. Okay. So the entire program takes place inside of a college readiness program. It was 1 full year. We were testing whether a specific program in VR could support mentoring and tutoring for high school students supported by college level students, right? All of it took place during the coronavirus pandemic. And so what happened was the director of the program said, how can I continue to provide mentoring and tutoring from a distance and not have it be in Zoom? And so they wrote a grant. They got 60 VR headsets for free to support these students. The reason they were able to get this specific grant is because these were all Upward Bound students. So if you're not familiar with Upward Bound, it's from the Higher Education Act of 1965. It supports very specific kinds of engagement, tutoring, and support for a category of excluded students. So some of those will be low income, free school lunches, those kind of things. It's a huge category, but so this is why this Upward Bound program exists. All of them don't call it Upward Bound, but it's a very recognizable program. And so while they're in this program, they applied for this grant, and the program that they chose to use in VR was Engage. So maybe you know Engage, maybe you don't. You'll get a chance to see it here in a minute. But basically, you can go into this VR environment and either have custom spaces or pre-made spaces, but then they partnered with Victory XR. So maybe you've heard of them by now, because when we partnered with them, they were very small. So like our meetings were with their main IT guy and the owner of the company and the one other person that worked for them. And since then, they've partnered with Meta. So they've gotten much bigger. But when we first started, they were really small. And so you had to go into Engage first. And then once you were inside of Engage, you chose a separate area within the Engage platform to enter these Victory XR events. And so events basically just means I created an appointment and we're going to go into this appointment. That could be a pre-planned event. So I can say, today we're going to do a pig dissection as a group. And we're all going to meet and we're going to all be plopped down into this environment. And we're all going to look around and figure out where we are. And then once we do that, we're going to walk over here. We're going to go to this lab. And then together we are all going to dissect a pig in virtual reality, right? So those are pre-planned events. Then you can also just have one-off where they just kind of show up and then together you go figure out what it is you're going to do. You can have a room exactly like this room and literally they can come and map this room. But it could be like this where you have a projector, you have slides, you have a person standing in the front, you have an audience. And so they're really big on mapping universities right now is what Victory XR is doing a lot. You can access Engage from basically any device that can get on the internet. So if you have your phone, you can download the app. If you have a computer, you don't have to download anything. You don't even have to, you just open a web browser and there you are. But it also works in VR. So you can have your students join or your learners join or your population join in multiple different ways. A tablet, Android, iPhone, PC, in the headset, and you can all still be together in all those different devices. So I'm just going to show you an example of what Engage kind of looks like. If it looks like. There we go. So in this example, we're dropped into an empty outdoor area, and then I'm going to put something into the room. So in this case, it's a headset. So now I can spin this headset around with a participant, and I can explain where's the power button, where's the volume controls, how do you adjust the back of your headset. In this case, this is the newest version of the Oculus where it has the different headband, right? So we can put anything we want in here that I can upload. So if you have a way 3D model, you can use that. There are thousands of pre-made objects already inside of Engage and Victory XR. So you can just choose from their catalog. And then you can put whatever this item is in the space that you're in and then manipulate it. So you can move it, make it bigger, make it smaller, make it disappear. You can have all of the learners put their own individual things in, or you can turn that option off. So it's not always on. So we call those FX. they're not on automatically. So if you don't turn them on, then only you can put them in, which is probably useful. Okay, so when I came on with the program, they had 60 headsets in a basement, all inside their boxes still. They hadn't opened them, they had not cataloged them, they had never turned them on, they were all still saran wrapped, because nobody could figure out how they were going to do the next step. And so I randomly met them in a meeting, and somebody was like, oh, you have these VR headsets? I know someone who does VR. What I really did was 360 video, but most people can't determine the difference, right? And so when I came on, I had to unpack 60 headsets over the summer, catalog all of them into our system so we could track them, get them all updated and turned on. One of the boxes was completely empty and saran wrap closed. So there was some fun that we had to do. So I would think step one, if you order headsets, open them right away. Then we learned that you can't just turn on all these headsets and then log them all in. And so they actually had Business Oculus, which is no longer around, right? But if you had Business Oculus, you could use that to manage the headsets, which meant there's nothing on the headsets, but they didn't know that at the time. So they thought they would have Engage, it would be on there, and then we could download other applications, and that's not the case. It's a little bit different now that you don't have to have Meta accounts, but we had to have a mechanism to protect the specific population we were working with, right? And so when I came on, I thought, these are the questions that I want to know about this implementation, this program, right? So I want to know how VR was actually going to support this program, this college readiness program, and was it the right thing to use for these students, right? And then what were they interested in learning in VR? Like, we know you could basically put anything you want inside of a headset, but what did students and mentors really think they were going to use VR for? And then what did they actually use VR for? And then would they acquire any language? Because my degree is language focused. But also, what kind of digital literacy were they going to get while they were inside of VR? So if you don't know about historically excluded populations, many of them don't have access to internet, don't have computers in their home. Most of them have never seen, much less put on a VR headset. And so I was really curious, like, what kind of learning are they going to acquire? Not just content related, but also to do with technology. So this might not be super interesting to everyone in here, but these are the frameworks that I use for my study. Dual coding theory just says that if you can use two different forms, visual and then either audio or verbal together, that it will increase learning. And then universal design for learning, because it just made sense, because I'm offering multiple options. And even within Engage, we were offering multiple options. So students didn't have to use the headset. They could just use the web interface if they wanted to. And then we talked about why you would want to do that and when you would want to do that. So this is the specific population. And I know I've kind of like brushed against who these students were, but this really like gives you a clear idea of the kind of students we're talking about. So it's rural students across the entire state of Washington, 5 different counties, 5 separate high schools. And they really did make up a real view of that population for the whole entire state of Washington. So not the entire high school population, but this particular part, right? So we took 5,000 students, and then that kept getting reduced down and reduced down and reduced down. And we were within 10% of the total state numbers within our population, which is pretty good. So then this is our funnel. We took the whole region, and that trickles all the way down. And once you went through all 5 high schools, we had 176 people who qualified to participate in the actual college readiness program. And of 176 students, only 16 were able to make it to the final step of the VR program. And we'll talk about that again in a little while when we talk about like issues that happened with this program. But so 16 made it to the finish line from beginning of the year all the way through the end of the school year cycle. And so this is the breakdown. We only had 4 mentors that were actually in the VR program. So out of 7 total. So we had 7 students in college supporting 176 high school students across the entire state. But only 4 of those did VR. Unfortunately, those 4 also did all the other students. So they didn't get just my 16 students. They still had to share the 176 total. But everyone that you see up here, all of us at some point were inside of one of these kind of headsets. And so then this is our timeline, just to show you. We started in the summer of 2020. We finished in the summer of 2021. We had summer meetings with students, so they come every single summer. And so the first summer was just seeing, can we get the mentors in a headset? Can the mentors support someone else in a headset? And can any of our population benefit from these headsets? And so we had like a mini launch during the summertime, and we trained all the staff on how to use the headsets because they had them for a year and never used them. They first had the Quest 1s, which are the black ones. If you look at over here on this table, we have white ones and black ones. The black ones are the Quest 1s. That's the original version of the Oculus. And so they all had one of those, and they'd all been practicing them, but they still didn't know how to update them. They didn't know how to manage them through the Oculus Business app. They didn't even know that you could update all of them at once. They didn't know that if you have more than one of them on the Wi-Fi at a time, it crashes the Wi-Fi. So we had to do trainings, and we kind of did trainings throughout. And then you'll see this section that says VR consultations period. So that was the busiest period for me because they made every single VR participant have one-on-one sessions via Zoom and in the headset at the same time while we walked through how do you use these headsets. Because like I said, many of these students had the first time they touched a computer was at school with a Chromebook. The first internet they had at home was the hotspots that got sent home with them for COVID. So they had a learning curve. So we also did surveys with all of these students just to ask them, should we keep doing this? What did you use while you were inside the headsets? What part was beneficial? What parts should we get rid of? We did get some interesting feedback. And so this was the count of content that they could say they used inside the headsets. And so we have 4, right? So I had 16 participants, but only 4 people said they used it for any actual content related to school. So they used it for their mentoring sessions, and they used it for things they did not consider content, but they specifically listed math, social studies, and communication. I'm surprised none of them said science because they all did pig dissections. We had some doing live birth mock-up simulations, but they didn't list any of that. So these are the things they felt they had actually done, even though when we looked back at the log, they really touched on all of these topic areas, right? And then this is just some of the things that they said that we categorized as either virtual reality or digital literacy. So remember that the population has basically no tech skills at all. And so they're saying stuff like, it didn't give me the option. And then I have to translate what they're talking about. So we're together in a headset, but what part didn't give you the option, right? So we literally have Zoom going, and we're both in a headset seeing each other on Zoom. And then these are the things they're saying. And they're like, is it the thing below settings? And so we just categorized all this language, and this is how we determined what digital literacy they gained or what language was specific just to virtual reality. So that when we go to do the next iteration, we can, in advance, teach them all of these specific things so that they're not trying to do them live in a headset on Zoom, right? Okay, so we asked if VR supported the college readiness program and if we should use it as a tool. And so based on mentor feedback, based on how the program went, and based on what the 16 students said for them, they felt that it should be offered, but as an option, not as the primary means of communication. And so they were expected to spend an hour every week in a headset that they were still learning how to use when they still couldn't remember to plug their Chromebooks in, when they had trouble getting their Chromebooks on the internet. Some of them were having to join from school or from a public building that had Wi-Fi access because even their hotspots wouldn't work from their house. Or a hotspot wasn't strong enough to run the Engage program that they were trying to open. Or worst case scenario, Engage had updates, which they had constantly. Sometimes the Oculus, because it was managed by Business Oculus, wouldn't allow them to do the update. So then they would have to make another appointment so they message you on Slack. We need to update my headset. They're in the middle of what they're trying to do, a mentoring session. So then is it worth them going into Engage on their device, or can they just go back to Zoom? And so I would say 75% of the time, they defaulted back to Zoom, unless it was an event that was already pre-loaded into the headset and they basically were passive participants of that event, right? But some students loved using VR. And so they would choose every single time to do all of their meetings in VR. They spent hours and hours in VR. And so we did decide it does give individual choice and autonomy for students who don't want this flat screen. Even though that works for a lot of people, some students really like the immersive aspects of VR. And so then we wanted to know, how can we keep using it for the program? Did it work for this program? And so it definitely gave them options, right, for expression. Students didn't want to show what they had learned to their mentors in Zoom or through an email or through Slack or through Discord. They wanted to take them into VR, put an FX in the middle of the room, and then tell them about what they had learned in VR and what was going on in their classes. And then it gave them that opportunity, right, to physically interact with materials they weren't able to touch. So even though nobody said they did science, every single science opportunity that was in Engage, they all did all of them. So it's just insane to me that they were like, that wasn't science, I guess because it was fun, right? And then the fact that they had a choice. So even though there were issues with Engage, so if it had an update or whatever, they still did have a choice of how they could do it. If they were late, if they had an event, if they were volunteering or working, they could run outside, get on their phone, and still meet the requirement of I met my mentor on Engage, right? So they had the choice of which way to do it. And then again, we'll talk about the content areas. And so we know they got these top 3, right? College readiness, communication, and academic content. We know that because we did all those things with them, and then they successfully did the next step. So most of the time, the next step is meet with your advisor, fill out this form, do your applications. And so we followed all of that in Slack. So we can see them doing those things, even though they didn't themselves believe that those things had been done, right? And then the same thing with the specific areas. So they said they did most of these, except for these two, science and chemistry. They never said they did science and chemistry, but we know they did because we did those events and then they talked about them in Slack. And then acquisition of digital literacy skills and perceived skills acquisition. And so this was what I was the most interested in was what kind of language did they pick up? How did their digital literacy improve from when we started to when we got to the end? And they did learn to apply like some of the pre-existing skills they had from using the Chromebooks or from what they had done in public school. But they were able to pick up really quickly every single new skill that it took to run one of those headsets. And it's because you're physically doing it. I can physically show it to you by putting another object in the room, and then we can manipulate it together. And so that part worked really, really well. I think what they learned the most and what they taught us the most was what we're calling VR jargon. And so we took the entire list of vocabulary they used to discuss their experiences, the issues they had, or when they were troubleshooting, trying to get through something. Well, where is it? How do I get to it? The specific words they use, we use those to build a dictionary that now tells us how to inform the next group of students. What kind of things are they going to say to describe where this button is, right? Do they describe it the same way I do? Do they say, there's a little flat button and it's under your thumb when you're holding the controller in your hand? Do they say that? Or do they call it the Oculus button? Which words do they use, right? They are always all, do you feel the joystick? Now go down till you feel something smooth and flat, push that. You know, so knowing how they described it help us to teach the next group of students how to use the headsets. And so obviously they successfully used the technology. After 2 or 3 sessions in the headset, they were basically experts and they could teach anyone else. Then they reported back they were teaching their friends, they were teaching their siblings. Some of them even got their parents inside of a headset just because their parents were like, what are you doing in these headsets, right? And so I think the bottom one is my favorite. Every single student and mentor who used VR reported that they enjoyed using it. So it means that if I want to force them to do something, it's easier for me to do that inside of something that they enjoy, right? Almost every single student participant, so the 16, stated that they had never used VR before, and that's the only reason that they signed up for the program. So we were kind of shocked by that was the only motivation. And it was like across the board. And these are students that are all across the whole state. So they've never met each other. They've never talked to each other. And all of them said the same thing. I've never used it, and I wanted to see what that was like. And so it shows you how this population has this lack of access to technology in general, right? Okay, so these were some recommendations that came out of this particular study. And so this image you're seeing is one of the science units that they said they didn't do, that they said they didn't learn from. So you could go in and you could manipulate planets, and it would give you some generic information about the planet. You could have a fake professor talk to you while you were doing it or not. And then you could manipulate the planet and things that were around it. You could see how close it was to the next body in the sky. And so these are the things I said that I thought we could see evidence for from this particular study, was that you could use this for TPR, which is just if I tell you sit, stand, sit, stand, sit, stand, and I model it for you, then you'll learn what sit, stand means. And that's a very simplified version of what I'm talking about. But anything that you can do by modeling, you can now do in VR because you have an avatar, right? And then obviously, I really felt like vocabulary building was something that could be done in VR because I can show you the object, we can discuss the object, I can put the words that indicate the object on the screen and we can hear each other the whole time. You can show videos inside of this app as well. So there's all these different ways where you can hit those content areas. And then if you don't want to make your own, there's a lot of custom made ones. They're already pre-populated, right? Realia is just the same thing. It's that physical object that I can put in front of you and we can discuss what that object is, right? And then the social and cultural skills practice, I did not participate in that particular aspect of this program, but I know that mentors and their learners all met inside of there and did mock-up practice things like, what is graduation going to be like? Or earlier I talked about there was a student who did a mock childbirth. Well, it was because he was going to experience childbirth in real life. And so he wanted to practice what that was going to be like when he had to do it. And so mentors reported back that they were able to practice things that students would do when they came to campus for events, when students would do when they went, like they go on trips to DC and things like that. And so they practiced those things and how they would navigate that new experience when they had no other way to practice. And so this is actually the picture of the students doing the mock-up birth. And it has a couple of different iterations, but you go in and there's this nurse or doctor in the room, and the person you see standing there is actually the student. So this is a picture they sent to us on Slack of them. So they're taking screenshots inside of their headset while they're going through this, and they did it multiple times. And so you see the timer, that's how long this particular version was. So he was in there for 2.5 hours doing this mock birth. And you could repeat it over and over again, and it would be different speeds. It would be slightly different things would happen when you're doing it. But he actually was practicing because he was like, I'm a senior, I'm about to be a father, I don't know what this is going to be like. And they happen to have a live birth simulation. And so he just kept doing it over and over again. And again, nobody thought this was science. And so other students then did go try to complete this particular activity, but he was the only one that ever made it like all the way to the end because a lot of them found it very uncomfortable to participate in this particular thing. And so I'm going to leave this great uncomfortable picture up here and then just talk about some of the biggest things that we didn't expect that were going to happen with these headsets. And so all the students had the white ones that you see over here. Those are all Oculus Quest 2s. One of them is a newer version of the same exact headset, but they're all Oculus Quest 2s. And so biggest problem number one, where's the power button? So every single version of this headset, the power button is the same color as the headset, and it's very, very small. So there's only 2 buttons on the whole headset. One is the tiny, tiny power button, and one is the slightly bigger but tiny, tiny volume control. And so try to think about how you would explain where that is to someone who's on Zoom, wearing a headset with their hands full of controllers. They can't see anything, and now I'm trying to tell them like where the volume control is because it's blaring in their ears and they can't hear me, so then you're taking your headset off and on and off and on. We had one student who reported, every time I use VR, I get a headache. And we tried to figure out what is causing, because it wasn't vision related. So we took the whole headset apart. So if you've never touched one, you might not know, a lot of the parts come off. Put it all the way back together. There's a special extra addition you can add underneath the face piece for if you wear glasses, but also for some people, it gives them enough room for their face to feel comfortable. She was strapping that headset down so tightly to her head that she was giving herself headaches from the headset. So there's some things that are easier to show in person. So we did it in the summer. No one had any trouble with that because we're all physically there and they're seeing us adjust our headset and put it on. So future iterations, that's why you see like the VR headset in that one video is because we're actually like showing them, this is where the straps are. This is where you adjust the lenses inside. This is where the buttons are. Some of these have stickers on them because students can check these out. And so they just literally but the labels are super tiny because there's not a lot of room on these headsets. So that was number one, was just how do you make sure they know where all the buttons are? So now they're labeled. Now we do, you can do the video and it shows you where it is. We did have them like watch the YouTube videos that Oculus gives you that tells you where everything is. Somehow that's not always enough, right? So then number 2, batteries. So students would get all the way up to their appointment, have everything ready, the headset is charged, they figured out Wi-Fi, they have Zoom, everything's going, and then I don't know why I don't have controllers, nothing's happening, right? 2 things One, when you get them brand new, or at least when we did, they had batteries in them, but the little plastic thing was in, right? So nobody had pulled the little plastic things out, but we didn't want to remove them before they shipped, because then we didn't know how long are they going to sit in this box. And so then we started a program of like sending batteries out to all the learners, so we make sure they had batteries. Then it was put batteries in the box with it, so there's extras, and like label it, like change your batteries every month, basically. Because even though inside the Oculus it gives you a battery, how much batteries are in your controllers, they don't see it. It's just this little thing down here, and you all get to see when you put the headsets on, like where that is. And so it was mostly that, or I didn't charge my headset because they'd never owned a device that you needed to charge before. So even though we think, oh, every high school student on the planet has a cell phone, most of my students did not have a cell phone. Or if they did, it was like a prepaid push button. Like they weren't on the internet with this cell phone. It was like my parents need to call me when I'm at work because I work 2 jobs and I go to high school. And I'm also in this program, right? And then also that working around their time was definitely an issue. But yeah, so they would like show up and then their headset's not charged. If all of those things worked perfectly, then it was, I'm in here, but I don't know where my boundary is. What's a boundary? That came up all the time. And a boundary is just the thing you have to set before the headset will really like show you anything. It's a safety mechanism, right? And so I've made some fake boundaries on the floor up here for people that want to participate standing, but the rest of you will need to be in a stationary boundary, which is what we call it when you're sitting. And so that was the other biggest thing, was just getting them through the first steps of how to do it. I think that the hour-long consultation was probably sufficient. So every single student had to do 1 hour with me in a headset and Zoom, and then we had to do some Slack messaging before they could actually get signed up with a mentor. If you didn't do all the steps up to talking to me, we didn't send you a headset. So we actually had 2 other students try to participate, but they could never get past all the steps required. And so simplification of this kind of program is really important, because if you don't have access to a computer, then just being able to finish all the application process, just getting us their mailing address so that we could send the headsets to them was a hurdle for some people, right? So then once they all got started, they used the headsets on their own. They set up meetings with their mentors and met with them with no trouble. And they did the entire whole year, and every single one of them said they would do it again. We had one mentor who said she would only do it again if they had more pre-planned events. So we were under the misconception that mentors and students alike would appreciate the freedom of doing all of this however they wanted to. And what we found out is there's so much going on trying to learn VR and navigate through it that they really wanted us to tell them what they should be doing in VR. So that was the biggest piece of feedback from all mentors and all students, was that we want you to tell us what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, which we did not expect from a bunch of teenagers and college students, right? We thought, oh, they're going to be like, we have this, we'll do it. No, they wanted all the whole program to be pre-planned, because they said the cognitive load was too high. Not their words, mine. But they like couldn't manage so many moving parts. And they were like, if you just take some of this off our plate, then the rest will be perfect. And so now I'm hoping a bunch of you want to actually put on a headset and feel kind of like what these students experience. So I have 2 headsets that are set up to use First Steps. And First Steps is literally what it sounds like. It's teaching you what the first steps are for Oculus. So it tells you like which controller does what. It shows them to you. It shows you how to use all of the controls that are on each controller and what they do. Why do you need the trigger button? And then it has you play a game. So some students played First Steps every week. Just not because they needed a reminder, because it was a fun game. So it's fun and it's educational, right? So the first 2 headsets over here, they both have First Steps on them. Then we have one that has Engage. So I have one with Engage because Engage is behind a paywall, and so is Victory XR. And so I no longer have access to Victory XR, but I do still have access to Engage. You have to sign into it. This was another major barrier for all of our learners, because we kept asking them for a single use login, like something like I'm 1 and my password is 2, like something really easy. Because when you put the headset on, you'll see you're pointing this imaginary line from your hand to a keyboard that looks just like the keyboard that pops up on your phone, right? And so that was a huge barrier for all of our learners and our mentors, just being able to like do this teeny tiny, you would spend 20 minutes just signing in. And that was my biggest thing, was if you're going to do a large scale program like this with so many headsets and so many students, you need to make sure that the programs you're using don't require a whole bunch of effort on the part of the user. And so then we also have one that says WebXR. And so that was my number 1 recommendation back then, was take every single headset, have the free games on them, get rid of Business Oculus, and then go find a bunch of things you can do. The Oculus browser is not great. I'm not going to lie. It's just like a PlayStation browser. If you ever use a gaming system and tried to get online, it's very akin to that. And so you just go through and save all your bookmarks. There's plenty of things that you could do to interact and do the social stuff, and maybe even some science content in the headset where you're not logging in and it's all free. And so one of the headsets over there says WebXR, and then one says free play. So if you've already used the headset before, you feel kind of comfortable, and you just want to see what else is available in the headset, or maybe you just want to look through the App Store and see what games are there besides Beat Saber. We also have that headset. So if you want to be standing, we'll be up here. If you want to be sitting, we can be in the front row. I only have 5 headsets. I do have face covers, and I would love to help put somebody in a headset. Anybody? I know you want to. Sure. All right. Okay, so do you want to do first steps? Oh, maybe you want to do engagement. Do you know how to screencast from a headset? No. So maybe we will try that. Okay, so this is the newer one, but it's still basically the same, right? So they all come with a little label that tells you left and right. The label eventually peels off, but I feel like they're kind of ergonomic, right? And then the newest ones now come with this option. So it doesn't come on there. It comes with the same like little elastic strap. But I wish we had had this, because then I could have just been like, roll all the way out, see it's all giant, and then now you're ready to put it on your face, right? So now see, students have all this stuff in their hands and they're on a computer, right?
Right. Is that over my glasses?
Yeah. If you're gonna be able to see, it has a glasses thing in it, but oh, is it gonna fit?
Yep.
And then if you can reach back there and tighten it. Okay, so what do you see right now?
Just black.
Just black. So it's actually on the side, and it's super tiny. So right there. So I tell them, like, find your band after suggestion, and then follow your band all the way forward to the front of your face, and then reach down. And even then, like, it's still really difficult to find the power button. Now what do you see?
Return to your boundary.
So it thinks that you're no longer in a boundary, so it's going to want you to reset your boundary. So remember earlier I talked about how in your right hand, if you feel the toggle and then slip your hand down, you'll feel a really flat button. That really flat button is the Oculus button. So if you push that, it should bring up a menu for you. And watch it won't now. There we go. So it's student directions. So our directions were just look for the flat button in front of your thumb, but it really wasn't for them. They kept feeling the toggle switch. No menu.
He's off.
No. Do you want to go through the painful event of taking it off your face?
Do you need me to take it off?
Yeah, and then I'll see if I can fix it. I turned all these on before we started, that way, hopefully. So if anybody's interested, they can just go ahead and go over there and grab one. They're all labeled. And so you'll see me do this thing where I flip it up. We figured out that these go to sleep and they turn black really quick. All right, so I'm going to do room scale. And I'm going to move you over here. So right now I'm walking around because I have pass-through enabled so I can actually see. So the touching the ground is to tell it where I'm at, and then it makes me the right height inside. Yes, that's my floor level. All right. Then I'm pushing the trigger button and turning in a circle to tell it how far I can step. So now I'm inside of, when I'm in the headset, it makes a blue line, and there's these little like X's on the floor, right? If I step out of this boundary, it goes away. It stops letting me see the content, and it tells me go back in your boundary, right? So I drew the tape on the floor just because I thought that would also be convenient. So once it likes the boundary, okay, it's going to work for you. So if you stand here, and I have my finger there because it's going to try to go to sleep as soon as you, there you go. Does it feel all right? Yep. All right. So you're inside of Engage. Now imagine trying to do this with 4 college students and about 12 high school students in a room similar to this, but full of tables and chairs and didn't have it. Who wants to try just free play? Where you can just, you did it on before? Okay, then you're probably fine. You can either sit right there, although I would suggest moving down so that you don't have to lift your arm up, or you can are. Just because once you have it on, it's hard to remember where your arms are. Yeah. So this one, you actually have to do Velcro. So this is the very first one that they ever made. The first. And they're super heavy. So now imagine trying to like walk a student through that on a computer. It wasn't great. Okay, left hand. Right. Okay, and then the most important button I think is again that Oculus button. So if you use your right hand, you feel the what's it doing here? That's volume. So if you reach up to the side, you'll feel, yep, you're almost there. You should feel that way. And it's really tiny. Oh no, they were all on. Some of them got asleep while we were waiting.
Yeah, when you were working with your students, it sounded like
oh no, so you tell them to turn it on, and they tell you, oh, it's on. And then they put it on their face, and they're like, oh, it's not on. Or it came on enough, you hear a sound, right? And then they hadn't charged it so long, it just died instantly after that. Isn't that crazy? That's the power button. Yeah. Okay, so while you're in your right hand, you have that button with the Oculus button, and then you also have an A/B that are right above it next to the toggle. So A is first, and B is the top. The toggle is, and then you have trigger buttons. So if you point your trigger at stuff, you should see a little white line.
Yeah.
And then you can point on stuff. So basically anything in there that will let you in, you can click it with the trigger and it will let you in. Yeah. And then you're in free play, so you can literally click on anything you want. And so you have a line in the front which tells you you're on. So is it working? Just see black. Okay. So a lot of them are going to be angry because I turned them on over there and all of them know they're not there anymore. So now imagine you have a student who sat at a desk, set it up, got it all ready, and they stood up to go over here where there's more space, and now, same thing, it's black inside, right? So then you have to do this walkthrough over and over again of how do you reset your room scale boundary or how do you set your stationary boundary. Most of the time, the device will give you an error message that pops up that tells you, do you want to set stationary boundary now, right? But it doesn't always come up, so then you have, or crazily enough, it's behind you. And so you think you're going to just click the stuff right in front of you, but it's popped up the message behind you because it thinks it's over there, right? So it can't imagine that she's now in this space. Okay, there has to be somebody brave enough to do first steps. And I forgot to say, I do have these little big things if anybody wants those. Okay, I'll give you the Oculus 2, and you can just stay right there. You should be able to keep your glasses on. Okay.
So is this an older Oculus?
Yes, but it's still newer than the black one you see here in front.
Okay.
Okay. And it should show you your controllers. So the controllers are actually to the headset. So if you have students end up meeting together and they all want to put headsets on and do something in the same space, then you have to make sure you tell them that controller, even though it's the same color, will not work with that headset. And literally you're stuck, you can't do anything. And they're like, I have my controller, I don't know what's happening, but it works. So we've also labeled all of our controllers. And so you'll see a lot of these, they stay on the inside, right or left, but then they also have a lot of tab numbers on them too. Does anybody else want to try first step? All right, you can do it right there. So I'm going to let you try and do it on your own, and then we'll see what happens. And then I have one more, and this one comes to WebXR. So basically, it's just the browser, and you can see the list of games that we then recommended to start out with, so the students can have some kind of interaction where they can meet. Some of them were just for social hours, and there's one that's kind of like Beat Saber, but doesn't require you to log in. If you know what Beat Saber is, it's just music, and you do like specific acts. So most of them is like Flash and stuff. So this is the same thing, but you're like dodging in and out of the way of objects to music, but it's free, no login. All my students can do it, and the students who can't put the headset on or don't want to can do the same exact game on the Chromebooks that they got from school, unless it's the one that's locked out. We did have that happen where 30% of our students could not access Engage from their Chromebooks. And we couldn't get the schools to turn that on because they were like, oh, it's not safe. I'm like, but it's still safe. So, nobody wants to try WebXR. It's super fun. Oh, there we go. All right. It should have the browser already open.
I just have this screen that says contact sales, so I
Oh no.
yeah, they love that.
Never heard it wrong.
Already sold. You're gonna do it? Waiting to see. Yeah, it just says contact sales, so.
So let's see if I can make Engage not be naughty, and then I'll see if I can put it up on the screen here for you. 1 second. And so I wanted to put like little stickers. There's a little tiny sensor right here that knows that you put it on your face. And I wanted to put stickers on all of them, but they didn't want to do that because when you take it off, it goes to sleep really fast sometimes. And then students are always distracted. Like they're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Okay.
I know there are some software that allow you to like sideload things on request, and they allow you to do things like disable that sensor. Is that something you ever considered?
Well, so it's because of the headsets we have and the way it was set up, there was a lot of stuff I could not do. I wish that they got all of their headsets through like a vendor. And I think that was all part of, because it was grant funded. And so there was a whole lot of stuff that I wanted to do that we couldn't, basically. All right.
What software are you using to manage your fleet now?
I would use Arbor XR personally, yeah. Right now, I don't think they're using anything. So they got a new director, and now they're back to we don't know what to do with 60 headsets, which is kind of unfortunate, right? But there are, what is there?
Well,
There's
coming back out.
Oh, nice. But so Arbor XR, if you're in education, you can get up to like 50 headsets basically for free. And so everyone I know that's doing anything in VR, that's what they use, but it's because they got the sick discount. Most of these are unmanaged. So they do them, they're not mine. They do them one at a time and then they make them all match, but one at a time. So they have one person, that's their whole job, is that they manage a whole room full of headsets basically. And I don't know why. I'm going to quit Engage and go back because sometimes that's the only way to fix it. I'm guessing you went to some really cool event that it wants me to pay for. Does anybody else have any questions?
So I keep failing the level. What am I supposed to be doing?
It wants you to continue to do them until you don't fail. So it's supposed to be teaching you, right?
Well, how do you fail?
You didn't complete all the steps that it asked you to do. So like you missed something that you didn't even see. And so that was another thing in first steps, which is why I recommended going to WebXR, is that it's impossible for you to know what part of first steps it is failing. It doesn't tell him, it doesn't tell me. Even if I was watching it on the screen with Cassie, so you can Cassie says this, which I was going to try and do this one, but it's being very difficult, which also happens a lot. Sometimes it's the headset doesn't realize his height right now. And so he's actually lower or higher than where the objects are that it is expecting him to be able to see and manipulate. And so then in Engage, it does have you have a setting where you can put the height of the person that's using it. We had them all do avatars and set their height. We always, before we started each time, made them set the room floor, where the room is, or the floor is in the room. But even then, sometimes the headset, even though it's pretty smart, is not that smart. And so it doesn't know how tall he is, and it might have populated his body halfway through the room or floating in the air. And so then you have to restart everything, right? See if I can make this one.
The one question
Uh-huh.
comes up when I think about VR, because there is great potential to
Right.
immerse somebody into something, but envision all of the technical hurdles, because it is not easy to get started.
No.
What about all the students with disabilities? Because, I mean, we're coming out with technologies all the time, but who's thinking about musicians? Because they wouldn't be able to engage in headset.
So the only students I can think of that wouldn't be able to engage in a headset is either someone who suffers from motion sickness for one reason or another, or who even with glasses is unable to see inside the headset.
Or can't use their hands.
So it actually has an option where you can look. So it's not turned on these because it's really complicated and you have to learn how to use it. And this makes more sense to people who see. But if you turn it on, you basically point your headset and you get one instead of two. So with the controllers, you get two little dots. If you can move your head, you can point, and then once the dot is on the right spot long enough, it will then engage with that item, right? So yes, there will be things that they clearly won't be able to do, but they can still be inside the headset. If this is just completely not an option, at least within this program, they could do it on a phone, a tablet, a computer. You can put it on a TV that's in front of them while someone else does the controls for them, so they can, in one way or another, indicate what they want to do inside VR and then still be able to do it. So it's the one thing I did like about Engage is that they could access it from multiple places, to where we thought we were to the point where basically, unless you couldn't see, you would be able to participate in some kind of way, possibly assisted, but yeah, in some kind of way.
How do you exit?
So do you remember that flat button? Look for it under your right thumb. So if you find the right toggle and then slide your finger down, you'll find a flat spot that's flatter than the rest, but it's still a button. Oh, you went too far. You're almost there. So find the toggle. That's the one that sticks up the highest. Nope, over here, that's the toggle. See how that's the tallest? And then right below it, you'll see that one. If you hold that, if you push that, it should give you a menu.
Okay, now it's zoom or quit.
So you choose quit and you'll go back to the menu.
I see you, but I don't see and I see the bar down here. What I choose on there?
So it should exit you just back into the main menu. So we want you to pick something off the bar.
Other percent. I just scroll over.
Right? And so things move around on you a lot. That was definitely like a difficult thing. And then plus, without the pass view, I can't tell what they're looking at, right?
So how do you scroll that first menu over?
So you actually use the trigger. So you point your little line at it, and just like as if it was a mouse and you're gonna like scroll down with your cursor, you kind of like push at it and then scroll down or scroll up.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like you had a lot of problems getting the word students using it. If those things were kind of gone away, like when do you see the beginning or the future of the program?
So I don't even think that a more education-focused headset is the issue. I think that
Well, like maybe it's not work for now.
right. A more pronounced power button, right? So if we could physically get that one thing, that was really like a huge hurdle for so many people. Unfortunately, my first suggestion is they should all have an introduction to this in person the first time. So before you just send headsets to someone, and something me and all of the mentors talked about was, rather than sending all the headsets out to all these random students, instead, we should take the headsets to each school, have a workshop with students, let them touch the headset, show them how it all works, do a whole day or a weekend event, and then have it be at each school for a set period of time to divide the year between the 5 schools, and then we just travel to them, and then we go give the headsets and travel to the next group. That way they're not managing updates, and they're not managing batteries, and they're not managing all those different things that really were barriers. And then I think just thinking about the headset in a different way. So they were like, oh, we're going to use this instead of Zoom. It's going to be a one-size-fits-all. Everybody's going to put on the headset. They're going to love it. Except it's really not, I don't think it's really made for that. And so some people are like, oh, use it for an hour or two. No, my personal suggestion is 20 minutes. If you're a grown person, over 25, fine. However long you can stand it, do it. It's probably great for you. But if you're still in high school or below, so K-12, and really it should be 10 and up. I think the company says 12 and up. 20 minutes. So this should be part of the conversation. This shouldn't be the whole conversation, right? It should be in addition to the other things that you're doing, just to provide that alternative moment, right? So if I'm talking about pig dissection and we have a student who can't stand the smell of formaldehyde, they can still do that activity and they never have to smell anything they don't want to. So in some ways, it's already perfect. But yeah, the power button. I think we should all email Oculus and be like, just fix they're trying to have it be smooth, right? If they could just change the color of that one item, even if you can't feel it more, just change the color so that it stands out. So I was like, can we just go through and Sharpie them all so that they like really pop out at you? And they're like, no, you can't do that. And then I was like, can we just do stamps on them instead of these stickers that peel off and then leave residue? And they were like, nope, we can't do anything that damages the body of the device. Yeah, it was fun. No, they're owned. They get to keep all of them. Yeah, I couldn't honestly tell you what the reasons were, other than a lot of it was so the physical parts. I have no idea why. The nuts and bolts of like how we were allowed to use it, what programs we were allowed to load on it. That was all privacy issues. So because of the specific population and then the fact that they were all minors, we had contracts with their parents. We had to ensure that we could control who could access their kids through this device. And even then we had to teach them, if you're engaged and you're playing around and you go into an event that we didn't schedule, other people can be in that event, strangers, and we have no control over that at all. So we had to talk their parents through, like, it's between you and your specific child, like whether or not you want them to have access to the other parts of engagement. We couldn't turn that off. All we could say was, student, only go in this tab that has the name of our school on it, right?